Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Today, I'm joined by a fellow submarine officer, Chris Seifert, and we're talking about empowerment. Many leaders find themselves in a situation where their people can't make a move without them. You might even be one of those leaders. Chris explains why micromanagement is often a systems problem and not a personality flaw. Now, here's the good news. It can be fixed by building a more confident team of decision makers. Now, if you want a more self reliant team that gets more things done without constant handholding, then listen to this important episode. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Chris Seifert. Chris is the founder of Enabling Empowerment and author of Enabling Empowerment, a leadership playbook for ending micromanagement and empowering decision makers. He spent over 20 years leading teams from the control room of a nuclear submarine to the plant floor and the boardroom. Chris helps leaders cut through complexity, stop micromanaging, and build environments where people are trusted to lead and expected to own the results. His mission is simple: give leaders the tools to build teams that are aligned, accountable, and energized. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn from his experience. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
It, it's great to have you on board. And we're big fans of submarine veterans on the show, obviously being
Yeah.
deep leadership. So it is great to have you. Maybe tell the audience a little bit of where you served and what you did in your time on the submarines.
Yeah, sure. So I actually originally enlisted as a nuclear mechanic and then graduated nuclear power school. I had already had a degree, long story for another day, how recruiters convinced me to enlist first, but they're pretty good at their jobs. But anyway, I eventually got commissioned as a supply corps officer and got the opportunity to go back, go to a submarine. And it was what I wanted to do when I joined in the first place. It was, absolute pleasure. I mean, the things I learned, as a leader, as an operator, have just, been tremendous benefits to me and, the work that I've done going forward. So I did my tour on the USS Asheville there, did a Western Pacific deployment, and then spent the last 3 years of my time in the Navy at the Navy Supply Corps School, prepping future Supply Corps officers to go out and do the same job I had done. So that was a great experience as well.
That's fantastic. And what people don't realize is that the supply officer is like a key part of a submarine. If you run out of like one thing, you could be in
Yeah,
trouble, like coffee or toilet paper, right? So
yeah,
it is a thankless task, I think, because everybody's worried about everything else in the submarine, and the supply officer is just worried about making sure you have everything you need for that deployment or for that, or for that patrol, but also just even resupply when you get to different ports and getting that organized and knowing what to order and what to bring on. So
yeah.
that is a tough and difficult job for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really gave me, I mean, the lessons I learned about, getting to see inside, the greatest supply chain, right? One of the most efficient supply chains on the planet, right? I mean, the delivery in remote locations, being able to sustain the ship. Just one of the most incredible things to me was, you have such limited space to store parts. And we spent so much time trying to make sure that we were absolutely putting the parts that we were carrying were the ones that we would need. And, I mean, the entire deployment, in the back of my head was, oh, please don't let something break that we need that we don't have on board, right? And every time they'd come to me, Chris, we need this part. I'd be like, oh, please let it be in the locker. Please let it be in the locker. And and every time it was, right? And I was like, this is I mean, the level of analysis and thought process that went into picking what goes on, what we would carry on board was just incredible, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
the fact that we were able to stay on mission for 90 days at a time was because of that. So,
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, you get an inside look at that as a young person is pretty
yeah,
amazing, for
yeah.
sure. So, what were some of the lessons that you learned in your time in the submarine service that helped you as you kind of transition into business and all the things you did in your business career?
Sure, sure. So, as one of the things we just talked about, and I'll just put it in the category of management systems. the management systems that the Navy, but in particular, I think the nuclear submarine force has are, bar none, the best. And not only are they just designed well in terms of how we manage things, and I mean everything, manage people from performance reviews and goal setting to managing materials and logistics and supply and workflow processes and procedures. Not only are the processes, incredible, but just the way the management systems manage the auditing of it and the, holding people accountable to it and the discipline. But and I've used those throughout my career. I mean, as I've scaled companies, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, a big part of it was how do we put standards in place so that when we go from 4 plants to 10 plants, we are doing things consistently. So the management system was big, but I also just say the culture. Well, what it is about the culture in the submarine force that makes them so successful, and really, a few principles in particular, questioning attitude, always questioning what's going on and what, having that attitude that, hey, something's about to go wrong and I need to figure out what it is. The dedication, the level of knowledge, and people really understanding why they're doing what they're doing. And, it's not okay to just do something because, you were told to. You need to understand why. And, the forceful watch team backup concept, right? Holding each other accountable, not waiting for the boss or the commanding officer to hold each other accountable, doing it, amongst your teammates. I'd say those were huge for me.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your book, Empowerment. But for me, it seemed like that it was a high level of empowerment. People think the military, well, that's command and control structure, but no, you had
Yeah,
a talented team of individuals who were empowered to take charge
yeah,
and to carry out the mission. And I think that was something that is a very unique situation. That I was actually surprised when I came into the civilian world that I didn't have that kind of the talented people
yeah,
around me that knew what to do in any circumstance, which is
yeah.
what I felt like we had in the Navy.
Yeah, I do think that's a little specific to it's one of the unique things about the submarine force though, right? Because if you're going to have a Marine that you're going to tell to run up a hill at a gun, you don't want him to know he shouldn't be asking you why, right?
Right,
He just needs
right.
to go do it, right? Like and you honestly don't want him to think about what's going to go wrong. You
Right.
just want him to go do it, right? But with a submarine, you're taking this vessel, you're cutting all communication with the outside world off and telling them to go operate independently for 90 days at a time, right? Um, so they have to be able to think for themselves. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, and I think that permeates through the whole culture of we're going to give you an order or actually, we're not even going to give you an order. We're going to give you a set of priorities and then turn you loose. And 90 days later, you're going to come back and tell us how you did. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that really permeates down, I think.
So I was in during the end of the Cold War, and the rumor was the Russians, the Soviets, actually, Soviets hated dealing with American captains because you never knew what they were going to do.
Yeah.
Whereas we sort of knew what the Soviets would do in different situations. So,
Right.
but they said we never know what a U.S. captain's going to do, and that's because, again, it
Yeah.
was broad priorities, and then they were given a lot of latitude to carry out the mission.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes
Absolutely.
it very hard to defend against
Hmm.
something like that. So, well, let's talk about your book.
Sure.
It's called Enabling Empowerment. So let's talk a little bit about what that phrase actually means and why does empowerment fail often?
Sure. Well, I think it often fails because leaders don't enable it.
Mm.
And I mean, really, that's the premise of the name of the book is really is as simple as that is what does it actually take? What do you as a leader have to do to actually enable your people to be empowered? I think that the reason it fails, a lot of leaders sit around thinking, hey, I want my team to make more decisions. I want them to be involved in this. I want them to take ownership for things. And so the way they kind of go about that is we have a meeting and a town hall, and we tell everybody that we want them to start taking more ownership, or we send out some emails, but we haven't laid the groundwork, right? Like
Mm.
that, I mean, that's there's not a magic wand and you just wave it, and it's happened, right? And the biggest thing, if you want people to be able to have, take on more ownership and which means they have to be able to make more decisions, they need to be capable decision makers, right? And too often, what I've found, and I mean, it's shocking to me, is that we just, in vast majority of organizations, I mean, I don't have a research paper, but man, we're in the high 90s. They, even the ones that have leadership development programs, are not teaching decision making as a skill. They
Mm.
teach things like how to coach people and how to, have difficult conversations. And those are all important. Those are all very important things for a leader to have. But fundamentally, when you promote people into leadership roles, you're giving them more authority to make decisions. And decision making is a skill. They need to be taught how to do that, or else they're just going to learn by trial and error, which is going to be very expensive for you and painful for them. And so the book is really about how I kind of, discovered that over my career and the way that I've learned to teach my teams how to make decisions. My first plant that I took over had been incredibly, horribly, very micromanaged. I mean, I could not, like, they would not make a decision. I had to make every decision. I was constantly being asked, what do I want to do about this? What do you want to do about that? And so, I struggled to get them to take ownership and get them to take over because they just weren't comfortable. They weren't confident, and they were scared of what, they would make a mistake. And so I had to learn how to teach them how to make a decision, how to be confident in their decision. And that's kind of the genesis of the book. So it's really about how do we prepare our teams so that when we come to them and say, all right, I want you to start making more decisions, they feel confident, prepared, and ready to do that.
So you bring up a great example. So you came into a role, you took over as a plant manager,
Hmm.
and you noticed that everybody's coming to you for
Hmm.
the answers. Is that one of the signs that maybe the team had been micromanaged in the past? Is that so? If our listeners are that are listening in, if they're constantly being asked, and maybe they're in a new role and they suddenly see that everyone's coming to
Yeah.
them for all the answers, is that a sign that possibly they were this group was micromanaged in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. The kind of two things that I listen for when around a group are, um, so, the people asking the boss or the leader, what do you want me to do? Right? So, what do you want me to do? What do you want to do about this? How do you want to do this? Or I'm just doing what I was told.
Hmm.
Right? And
Yeah.
those two phrases are a clear sign that you and look, sometimes it's, the person doing it right now may not be the micromanager. It may have happened two plant managers ago or two leaders ago, but it's become that has become the norm, right? And look, there's a little bit of a notion that, nobody likes a micromanager. That's not true. I've been in plenty of plants where the plant manager was a micromanager and the people liked him
Hmm.
because he made all the decisions for them, right? And they were never accountable for anything. They could just wait and blame the plant manager on everything on them. And that kind of just became the norm, right? And
Yeah.
that's where it's really challenging to turn that back over. I mean, I had again, I use manufacturing. Most of my career has been in manufacturing, but I want when I was an executive, I went to sit in one of the plant manager's offices one day. I was visiting the plant, didn't have a place to work, so I'm just working in his office. And all day long, I mean, just one after another person come to the door, knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, this widget turner broke. What do you want me to do about it? Hey,
Yeah.
this we got this order that's late to a customer. What do you want to do about it?"
Yeah.
Right. And I just looked at him and they loved him. Right. They absolutely, I looked at him and I was like, what are you doing? And
Yeah.
he didn't even
Yeah.
realize it. Right. He didn't even see what was happening. I was like, they're dumping everything on you. Right. Like they
Yeah.
just expect you to solve all their problems. And that's not okay. We got to fix that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting. Like you just said, so you've sort of like turned the table a little bit here because we often hear that people don't like micromanagers, but in a way, as you said, sometimes they do like them, like because they are they're taking everything on their shoulders. to make all the decisions, to take responsibility, and so they don't have to. So they just throw
Yeah.
everything on the person. And it's interesting because throughout my career, I've been in situations like a lot where people are trying to. We would say, give me their monkey and put the monkey on my
Yeah.
back, and I'm like,
Sure.
no, I'm not taking that monkey. That's your
Yeah.
monkey,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
people love to do that. They just love to
Yeah.
throw things on their leaders and just say, well, I now he's got it or she's got it. I don't have to worry
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
So that is really interesting. So in some cases, micromanagers are liked because they do take, they are taking everything on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And so they're and there can be less, there's less responsibility for the people. It's like, great, I'm not the boss. I
Yeah.
don't care. I'll just
Yeah.
give it to him and my job is done. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it was it was, I remember my first day at a different plant, at my first, couple days, we were doing kind of town halls with the people, and they kept asking me, what are you going to do to fix this plant? What are you going to do to
Mm,
fix this plant? Right.
yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to do anything like, but we are going to do something.
Yeah.
You're going to tell me what you need to fix it, and I'm going to get it for you. Like, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes, I mean, there's no doubt there are micromanagers out there that are narcissists and are insecure and, whatever, have some kind of complex. I mean, I'm not going to deny that those folks aren't out there. My experience is they're actually a pretty small percentage. And that most of the time when there's micromanagement going on, it's done by a leader who is trying to do the right thing and just doesn't know how to get out of it, right? They
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they they don't want to be doing it. They don't want to be having to get the phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning. They don't want to be, can't go to dinner with their family. They don't want that, but that's where they're at, and they don't know how to get out of it. And the problem is usually every time they try to get out of it by standing up the town hall and saying, I want you all to make more decisions, but then those people aren't prepared. And
Right.
so either they don't step up and do it, or they do and it goes really bad, and the manager has to step right back in.
Yeah.
And now it's even worse than it was before, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I call the micromanagement doom loop, is you get stuck in this loop of this cycle of, I want to empower you, I try to empower you, it goes really wrong, I take back over. Now we're worse than we were before, and we just get stuck there. So
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And I see this a lot with entrepreneurs too, is that, you hear this common thread, well, I can't take a vacation. I need to be there. You need to be there. And I'm
mhm.
like, this is a problem. You haven't created a team that
Yeah,
sort of has ownership and knows what to do and can make decisions in your
yeah,
absence. And so, I've been running my company for 9 years and last summer I went away for a month and in a cabin
mhm,
in Maine and
mhm,
because I have a team that knows what to do, right? And so I
mhm.
think you get that freedom when you build up an organization and a team that has the capability to make decisions on their own without
Yeah,
having to involve you every step of the way. I see that a big problem with entrepreneurs. As we've talked to a lot of people on the show, where entrepreneurs can't let go. They feel like they have to,
yeah,
because it's their baby and they have to make all the decisions. They're the expert, and I
yeah,
think that can cause a lot of stress. It can cause, family
yeah,
issues, health issues, because they can't let go. And they feel like they have to make every decision for the business.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And I think, the challenge when you're smaller, this is a problem you can get over just through coaching folks, right?
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
challenge is as you grow and scale, that doesn't scale, coaching doesn't scale like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, look, I'll go back to that first plant, again, kind of an example. I'd been there 2 weeks as a plant manager. I had a shift leader come up to me and say, Hey, Chris, the plywood press broke. One of the openings on the plywood press broke. What do you want me to do? Okay, now, first off, that's not the kind of leader I am. I don't want to tell you what to do. I want us, I'd like you
Yeah.
to make a recommendation or us work together. But number two, I've been here 2 weeks. I don't have a freaking clue what to do
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
plywood,
Yeah.
right? So I said, so I told him, I said, well, I'd like you to make a recommendation. And he looks at me like I'm nuts, right? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not how this works. And so I said, no, seriously. And so then we talked first about, well, what's this problem costing us? Okay, it's costing us 2.5% production every hour. All right. So what are our options? Well, we can shut it down and fix it right now. We could wait to the next outage day and shut it down and fix it. We could plan overnight to fix it, shut it down tomorrow. Like we went through all these options. And then we started, well, how much is it going to cost if we shut it down now versus if we run at 2.5% rate, for the next 3 weeks? And we did all the math on those options. And at the end of the day, one of the options, the math said this is the right option, right? And so we talked through all that. And the funny thing is, even at the end, we got done doing all the math, and he says, "So what do you want me to do?" Right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Well, what does the math say, man?" And he finally was like, "Well, we finally got through it." And that whole conversation, though, like that was me teaching him how to think through the decision. He'd never
Yeah.
had to do that before, right? He'd
Yeah.
been there for 20 years, never had been asked to do that. And so what was my dilemma was, I got 500 operators in this plant. How's
Mm.
that going to work? I can't do that 500 times. It's not
Yeah.
going to work, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, which is another frustrating thing, is I think, so often the leaders that are in that, well, you just got to mentor and coach people. But how are they going to do that when they have 200 people? That's not going to work, right? And so that's why through the process that I teach people, you can get some scale, right? I can teach you a process to think about and make a decision. And then what I can tell you is, hey, every time you come to me or one of the other leaders and you say, hey, here's the problem. These are the alternatives I've considered. These are the key drivers, right? This is what I recommend we do about it. And if we're all doing that the same way, then we learn together. We all get better at doing this, thinking through these decisions better.
That makes a lot of sense. So you talk about in the book the idea of shifting from this heroic leader to a shared leadership model. So is
Mhm.
that what you're talking about in terms of like building a team which can actually, that can make decisions at a lower level?
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to empower them. Another term I'll use is principled entrepreneur, right? I don't want a bunch of employees. I want a bunch of people who act like principled entrepreneurs. They take ownership for it. They and look, they're willing to take risks with uncertain information because they know they've thought through it the best they can, and because they can explain how they thought through it. I'm not gonna, you know be unreasonable when things happen.
Yeah.
So, one of the biggest problems when you are the heroic leader, or which is I think just a nice way to say a micromanager, right? Or you're the micromanager everybody likes, because you're a nice guy or a nice lady. But the one of the other things that's really insidious about it is then the people don't take ownership, right?
Mm.
I think there are really two things. When we talk about people being engaged, there's, well, you gotta have the right perks, and you gotta ask them about their kid's softball game or what, all these things, that people want to say, work from home, whatever. At the end of the day, what it really takes for people to be engaged are they have to believe in the vision of what you're trying to do, that it's important and worth doing, and they have to believe that they influence the outcome.
Mm.
And
Yes.
if they have those two things, people will actually put up with extraordinarily bad conditions and still be very engaged. Yeah, I think you can identify. We were on submarines. They weren't a great, like, it wasn't great work-life balance,
There
right?
was no work-life balance.
No, right? The
Yeah.
food was, okay most of the time, but it had its moments. Right? It wasn't, I mean, it was stressful. You didn't get a lot of sleep. But why were people so engaged? Because we knew what we were doing was really important, and if we knew that if we weren't there, it wasn't going to get done. And so, that's where a lot of leaders get all twisted around trying to worry about all this other stuff when what they really need to do is say, are you connected to do we have a vision that I communicated a vision that they believe in, and do they understand how they contribute to it? Well, the biggest way they contribute to that is by making decisions. And if they understand, hey, I'm the one who's deciding what we're going to do when the plywood press breaks, or what we're going when I have this angry customer in front of me, I'm the one deciding how we're going to handle that. Now they have ownership in it and they're influencing the outcome.
I
So
love that. I love that. You say that micromanagement is a systems problem, not necessarily
yeah.
a personality flaw. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of why is it a system problem and what kind of systems fixes need to come into place to sort of get that into a bigger organization?
Yeah, so and I'm going to break the systems comment down into two things. I'm going to call it uh, capacity and capability.
Mm.
So most people think that micromanagement is an intention problem, right? Meaning that the leader intends to be doing it. But my experience is it's actually a capability and a capacity, meaning the people aren't capable and the leader doesn't have the capacity to do it, right? And so the first thing we have to do is if we want leader, as we're promoting people up into roles, we need to be training them and teaching them how to make decisions so that we can turn over that authority and responsibility to them. And look, I'm not. It doesn't mean right out of the gate you promote somebody into the shift supervisor role and you tell them, "Hey, don't call me at night. Just do whatever you think is right."
Right.
But maybe it means, "Hey, look, when you call me, I expect you to." When you wake me up at 3 o'clock, I don't want you to pick up the phone and tell me widget turner broke, ask me what do you want me to do. I expect you to say, Chris, the widget turner broke. Here's the alternatives I've considered, right? Here's my thought process. This is what I recommend we do, so that I can just say, very well. And after the third time we've been through that discussion, I can tell you, hey, you don't your thought process is good. You don't need to call me anymore, right?
Mm.
Now, if I don't make them say it to me that way, make their recommendation like that, if they don't have to explain the thought process and they just call me up and say, Chris, the widget turner broke, I think I should take it down and fix it. I don't get the opportunity to understand how they arrived at that conclusion,
Mm.
right? So I don't get to trust them, right? I mean, as far as I know, he just flipped a coin and that was the answer that came up.
Mm.
And so by teaching them how to explain it, so that's in terms of systems, it's really the capacity is training them, putting that in place and putting those kinds of processes in place where people have the opportunity to test and learn and get better and demonstrate. I can make good decisions here, so they can get more authority. And then another part around that is a concept I like to refer to it as decision rights, right? So people get to earn more decision rights. And
Mm.
what you see in most companies is authority is delegated by position.
Mm.
Okay, so for instance, in a manufacturing company, all plant managers have the authority to spend X dollars on capital or on maintenance or whatever it is, right? Or all, procurement managers or whatever. They all have the same based on their title. This is your authority. And the ERP systems don't help because that's how they're set up, right? They have the little table in it. You set up the purchasing authority based on what their title is, and everybody in the company that title can spend that amount of money.
Right.
The problem with that is the only thing I know is some of those folks should not have that level of authority, right? Because they're
Mm.
not actually capable. And some of them should have more of that, right? In fact, there's probably very few that we happen to land on exactly the right level of authority they should have. And so one of the things I did was work with my teams to say, hey, this is going to be based on your role. Let's talk about the kinds of decisions you make, whether it's spending money or changes to in our case, a production schedule or changes to the staffing. Let's talk about what those are, what the different levels look like, and where the right place for you today to be able to make a decision without talking to me is, and where should you talk to me? And over time, let's move you up. Like, let's figure out how do we get it to where I'm comfortable saying, and you're comfortable, right? Saying, I don't need to talk to you about this anymore, Chris, because the last 4 times I talked to you about this decision, you agreed with me. So
Mm.
there's no benefit in us talking about this anymore, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it almost sounds like there's a cultural element to this as well. So, sometimes in a micromanagement environment, people are afraid to make decisions because they get fired or they get
Mm.
written up for taking things on their own. Whereas you're creating an environment where you do want to push the decision making deeper into the organization. So there has to be sort of an element of maybe grace or forgiveness, or I don't know what the right term is, but allowing people to make decisions and sort of learn, how to make decisions and to
Yeah.
be able, and to be able to grow in their ability to take ownership. Is that part of it
Yeah.
too, a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So not only do I teach people decision-making process, but I also teach them about well, I call them decision traps. Scientifically, they're known as cognitive biases or heuristics, right? And so I teach people how to recognize those and realize how they affect their decision making. And that's why you need to use a process. But one of those I teach about is hindsight bias, right? The
Mm,
notion that we always look back on our decisions and think it was possible to know things that it just wasn't possible to know at the
yeah.
time. And so one of the, I because I really understand that and know that, one of the things I tell my teams is, you know, you should not judge, you cannot judge the quality of a decision based on the outcome. You
Mm,
can't. I know people want to do that, but you can't. And I'll just give you a couple examples. If you walk into a casino and you put $500 on black and win, was that a good decision? I
yeah.
mean, do it 100 more times and see what happens, right?
Right. Right.
If you drove home drunk from the bar last night and you got home safe and you didn't have to pay for a cab and your car was outside when you got up in the morning, was that a good decision? No, right? So we can't look at an outcome and say the decision was good. We can only judge the quality of a decision based on what was knowable at the time and what we did with that information,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So the last step in the process that I teach people about decision making, I call it show your work, right? Which just means I'm going to jot down hey, I'm making this decision. And for something, the middle of the night for one of my operators, this might have been just, I'm jotting this down in the log, right? This was my problem. Here's the three things I considered. I picked this one. Here's why, right? So that then the next morning, if something really had gone wrong, we'd say, what were you thinking? When
Yeah.
we're upset, they pull out the log and we look at it and go, okay, yeah, well, you're right. I understand why you did that now. That made
Yeah.
sense at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So and you don't, steal another phrase from the military all the time. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, it's always really easy for us to think we knew things that we didn't. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think organizations that you where you have a chance to make decisions and learn from those decisions, learn from either like a poor decision or a mistake, that you're going to get better next time you make a decision, right? So,
yeah.
I know, on the submarine, we would stand these junior officer of the watch, or, and we would,
Mm,
we get beat up. They run all sorts of drills on us. And so you would have all this failure. And then you get a chance to stop the drill and sort of
mm,
recognize what you did wrong. Like, what were all the mistakes you made? And we did that we had someone above us that was,
mm.
kind of watching to make sure that we didn't really make a big mistake. I think part of, at least what I've seen in empowerment, is if you're there to sort of watch over as somebody's developing those decision making skills and those empowerment skills, is to be there to sort of support them until they are able to stand on their own and sort of learn from their
Yeah.
mistakes, and then they can stand on their own. I think that's the environment you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And because I teach them how I, think through a decision and how I want them to think through it. And so consequently, when they come to explain a decision or a recommendation to me, the format, right, the way they should do that, um, it helps me. They already know the series of questions, right? If they start in with, "Hey, Chris, I'm going to go do this," they know the first question. Back up. What's the problem we're trying to solve? Right?
Right.
That's going to be my first question.
Yeah.
Right. And then once we talk about the problem, before you talk about what you want to do, I want to know what other alternatives have we considered? Right. I
Mm,
want to know them. What are the two or three things that are really matter here? Right. In most decisions, there's really only two or three things that matter. Right. There might be 10 or 20 or 30 variables. Too often we get hung up on analyzing some variable that really doesn't matter. So they know those questions in advance, right? Because they're going to get the same ones every single time. And so, again, that just helps scale and it helps give them the support on, they know when they need help to think through it, then, that's the process that we're going to follow.
no, that's fantastic. Well, I really like what you've got here, which is sort of a systematic way to enable empowerment.
Yeah.
And this is in the book, and I think you're giving us a lot to think about. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
Yeah. If you're a leader today and you are not thinking about, and you are not intentionally, making your team better at decision making, I would challenge you to think about that. If your competitors are doing it, what's that going to mean for you? Because again, decision making is a skill. We can improve it through practice and training. And, if you're just leaving it to chance, and look, there's a lot of gurus out there telling everybody to trust their gut. The science is definitive. Like your gut is really bad at making decisions that involve uncertainty and complexity, right?
Yes.
Really terrible at it. Um, the challenge is when we get lucky and get it right, we tend to think, oh, see, our gut was right, but it's just statistics. Sometimes you're right. So be thinking about that as a leader. What am I intentionally doing to make my team better decision makers so that I can give them more, authority and autonomy?
Fantastic. Such a powerful message. I love it. This is great. Chris, how can our listeners find out more about you, your work, and this book?
Sure. Well, the book's available on a bunch of places, Amazon. You can also go to my website, www.enablingempowerment.com. And in the book, I give a lot of tools, examples, right? Like, hey, here's a cheat sheet for how to do this. Those are all on the website. So you can get them all, download them for free from the website as well. The other place on YouTube, you can subscribe to At Enabling Empowerment. I've got put lots of video, once a week or so, post a video on a specific decision trap. So things like confirmation bias, the gambler's fallacy. What does that mean? How does that trick you? What can you do about it? And there's a course. I have an online course that you can get to through those places for, if you want to give that training to your teams.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we're going to go ahead and put links to all of Chris's resources here in the show notes. So take a look down below. You'll see that in the show notes. The book is called Enabling Empowerment. And if you're one of those leaders that everyone's coming to you for all the answers, you might have a problem. And Chris has got a way to solve that problem and to
Yeah.
get your team empowered in the proper way so that they're making decisions without you and so that you can actually have a life. So you can have a
Yeah.
little bit of a work-life balance is what we talked about earlier. So follow the links below in the show notes. Pick up this book called Enabling Empowerment. We'll have links to his book, his website, also YouTube channel as well. That's a good one to subscribe to. And again, you're going to learn a lot about decision making and how to teach your team proper decision making. Chris, this has been a fantastic discussion. I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate the work you're doing, and you're sort of taking sort of what skills you learned under the ocean and what you practice in business, and now you're giving us tools to help us be better leaders. And I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, John. Thanks. Great.
Thank you. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.